My grandpa Walter was the kind of man who kept receipts in shoeboxes and ironed his jeans. He smelled like Old Spice and paper. Growing up, I thought he was just careful. If you asked him how the market was doing, he'd say, "Markets don't do anything. People do," and go back to his crossword. But there were always strange moments in our family that didn't fit the neat picture. A certified letter showing up at my parents' house when I was 14, Grandpa quietly taking it outside like it was something that might bite. An uncle who'd show up unannounced, sit at Grandpa's kitchen table, talk in a low voice, and leave with a manila envelope. A friend from church who wasn't from any church we went to, waiting in a car with the engine running. Money was always around and never talked about. Grandpa paid for my braces without anyone asking. He slipped my mom cash for groceries, even when she said we were fine. And when I got married, he wrote a check that made my wife's eyes widen, then told me, very calmly, "Don't tell anybody what I did." I didn't understand what that meant until later. After Grandpa had his stroke last winter, I became the practical one by default. My mom is emotional, my aunt is suspicious, and my uncle is a professional victim. I'm the one who keeps lists and keeps my voice even. Grandpa had named me executor years ago, like he knew I'd do it without theatrics. At the nursing facility, he was smaller than I remembered, but his hands still worked. He kept rubbing his thumb against his forefinger, like he was counting invisible bills. When I asked about the will, he said, "It's simple, just follow it." Then he grabbed my wrist with surprising strength and whispered, "Do not let them open the blue box." I laughed because it seemed like dementia. He didn't laugh back. His eyes were clear and hard, and that made my mouth go dry. 2 weeks later, he was gone. At the house, we moved through the motions. Food trays, condolence cards, my mom clutching a sweater that still smelled like him. My aunt kept asking, too brightly, "So, what's he leave?" Like inheritance was a kind of comfort. The strangest thing was the silence afterward. No mysterious visitors. No envelopes. Just an empty chair and a locked study door. When we met with Grandpa's lawyer, the reading of the will wasn't dramatic. It was a conference room that smelled like toner and burnt coffee. Grandpa's will was, on paper, boring. The house went to my mom and aunt jointly. A small cash bequest to each grandkid. My uncle got his old pickup and any tools remaining. No mention of anything else. Then the lawyer slid a separate document across the table. A list of debts. There was a home equity line of credit on the house with a balance that made my mom's face lose color. There were property tax arrears. There was a personal loan from a local credit union. And there was something called a merchant cash advance tied to an LLC none of us recognized. My aunt snapped, "That's not possible. Dad didn't do debt." My uncle actually smiled, like misery was finally being distributed fairly. I felt a slow heat creep up my neck. Grandpa had always acted like debt was a moral failure. He used to tell me, "If you can't pay cash, you can't afford it." Meanwhile, he'd been borrowing like a desperate man. The lawyer said gently, "Creditors will want payment. As executor, you'll need to inventory assets." That was the first time I thought, maybe the strange events were not quirks. Maybe they were symptoms. I started the inventory the way I handle anything uncomfortable. Methodically. I made a spreadsheet. I labeled boxes. I opened drawers. The study was worse than I expected. Not messy, but packed tight. Filing cabinets full of client folders even though Grandpa had retired from bookkeeping 10 years ago. A small safe bolted to the floor behind a bookshelf. A locked metal box painted blue sitting on the desk. Exactly the kind of thing Grandpa would have called a place for important papers. I heard his whisper again, "Do not let them open the blue box." I told myself he meant my aunt. He didn't trust her. She'd borrowed from him before. My mom said it once, then never again. So I opened the blue box. Inside were cashier's checks, old bank statements, and a handwritten ledger with dates and amounts in neat columns. The statements weren't from his usual bank. The account holder wasn't Walter H. It was a name I recognized. My mom's maiden name, but with a different middle initial. There was also a second set under my aunt's name. and tucked under the ledger was a single sticky note with my social security number written on it. I sat there holding that note, feeling the blood drain out of my hands. I didn't need to be dramatic to know it was bad. My breathing got shallow anyway. I drove home and, for the first time in years, logged into my credit report. I told myself I was overreacting, that Grandpa probably wrote it down for some legitimate reason, helping with a student loan, something like that. 3 unfamiliar accounts stared back at me. A business credit card, a personal loan, and the HELIC listed under authorized signer. The balances weren't small. The HELIC alone was 6 figures. I refreshed the page like the numbers might change. My wife watched from the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, not accusing but braced. "What is it?" she asked. I heard myself answer in a voice that sounded normal. "Grandpa used my identity." The words didn't feel real until my stomach lurched and I had to grip the edge of the desk. Heat in my face, cold in my fingers. A ridiculous thought popped up. He used to hand me a 20 and say, "Don't waste it." Meanwhile, he'd been building a debt minefield under my feet. I called the credit union and asked about the personal loan. The woman on the phone was polite until she wasn't. "Sir, the signature on file is yours." I wanted to say it wasn't, but I'd seen Grandpa's handwriting my whole life. He could imitate mine easily. He'd taught me cursive. I realized that like a delayed punch. He knew how I wrote my name because he made sure I did it his way. That night I didn't sleep. I kept seeing the sticky note, like a tiny confession. The next day I confronted my mom first. Not because she was responsible, but because she was the one who would break in the softest place. We sat at her kitchen table, the same table where Grandpa used to tap the newspaper and lecture us about interest rates. I laid out copies of the credit report. My mom read them slowly, lips moving. When she got to the HELIC, she pressed her hand to her mouth. "He wouldn't," she said, and it came out like a prayer. I kept my voice level. "Mom, it's in my name." She started crying the quiet way she does, shoulders shaking but no sound. After a minute she said, "When you were little, he took me to the bank. He said it was paperwork for something for you, a savings bond. I signed because he said it was for you." My aunt, when I called her, didn't cry. She got defensive immediately. "Why are you digging? We should just sell the house and be done." That phrase, "be done," hit me wrong, like she'd already rehearsed it. I drove back to Grandpa's house and opened more files. In the cabinets, I found folders labeled with family names. Not just ours. Neighbors, church members, people who'd brought casseroles to the funeral. Each folder had copies of IDs, signatures, and notes about cash needs, tax issue, bridge. It looked like Grandpa had been running a private bank, except the loans were funded by other people's money. The strange visitors. The envelopes. It had a shape now. The first twist was realizing Grandpa wasn't broke at all. I found cash in places that made no sense. Wrapped in wax paper inside a cookie tin, taped under a drawer, sealed in a plastic bag behind the water heater. Not a few hundred, thousands. Then I found a key taped under the desk. It went to a safe deposit box at the bank across town. I went alone, because I didn't trust the way my aunt's eyes kept flicking to my bag whenever I visited the house. At the bank, the clerk checked my executor papers and disappeared. When she came back, she carried the box like it was heavier than it should be. Inside were gold coins, a thumb drive, and a stack of cashier's checks made out to W.H. Consulting LLC. Total more than my annual salary. My hands started trembling, subtle but uncontrollable. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. This was the money that explained the braces, the wedding check, the quiet groceries cash. It also explained why Grandpa acted like a man who could afford to judge everyone. I took the thumb drive home and plugged it into an old laptop. Contained spreadsheets, clean, detailed, obsessively organized. Columns for investors. Columns for payouts. Notes like, "Keep her calm," and "Delay him." It wasn't a retirement fund. It wasn't savings. It was a scheme, and my name was in it, not as a victim, but as an account holder. I wanted to call the police. I also wanted to not call the police. Those two wants lived in my chest at the same time and made me feel sick. If I called, I'd be the executor who exposed a dead man and dragged our family through public humiliation. If I didn't, I'd be complicit. And in the middle of that, there was the cold fact. My credit was wrecked. My wife and I had just refinanced. We had a kid in daycare. We weren't in a position to take the moral high ground and absorb 6 figures of debt. I told myself I was being rational. I told myself Grandpa would have wanted me to protect the family. I told myself a lot of things. So I did something I'm not proud of. I took some of the cash I found in the house and paid off the smallest loan in my name. Not all of it, just enough to stop the immediate bleeding. I moved quietly, like Grandpa had taught me, keeping receipts, making sure the payments looked normal. When my wife asked where the money came from, I said, Grandpa had cash hidden. She stared at me for a long time. And you're using it. It's my debt, I said, and felt shame rise like bile. The shame didn't stop me. It sat in the room with us and watched. A week later, the first creditor showed up at Grandpa's house with papers for the LLC. He wasn't a sheriff, just a guy in a cheap suit with a practiced smile. "Where's Walter?" he asked. I had to swallow before I could say, "He's dead." That creditor's paperwork led to the second twist. Grandpa had signed contracts that didn't die with him. The merchant cash advance wasn't a simple loan. It was one of those predatory deals where they take a cut of future receivables. Except there were no receivables. Grandpa had created a fake business to qualify, then listed the house as collateral through a personal guarantee. In other words, the house my mom grew up in, the house she thought she inherited, was a piggy bank with teeth marks all over it. We met with a lawyer who specialized in debt and estates. He spoke in calm sentences that landed like bricks. Liens, clawbacks, personal liability. My mom's hands shook so badly she couldn't hold her coffee. My aunt kept saying, "But Dad wouldn't do that," while scrolling on her phone like denial had an app. The lawyer asked, "Do you know where he got the funds he used to make payments?" I didn't answer. My silence felt loud. That night, my uncle called me drunk. He said, "He took my pension once, told me he'd manage it. Then he gave me that truck and said we were even." I didn't respond fast enough, so he kept going. "He did it to all of us. He just did it with a smile." It clicked then, the family fights that never made sense. The way holidays were tense around money, but no one could say why. We weren't just grieving. We were orbiting a secret everyone had been burned by differently. And Grandpa had chosen me, the rational one, to clean it up. The third twist came in a plain white envelope from the IRS. It wasn't addressed to Grandpa. It was addressed to me. The letter said there were discrepancies involving reported income from a business entity, W.H. Consulting LLC, and that I was listed as a responsible party on certain filings. I read it twice, then a third time, like repetition would change meaning. My mouth went dry enough that my tongue stuck to my teeth. I drove straight to the accountant's office listed on the LLC documents. A small strip mall place with faded posters about "Maximize your refund." The woman at the desk looked at me like she'd seen my face before, which made my skin crawl. The accountant, a tired man with a tie loosened at the collar, pulled up the file. "Walter brought in paperwork," he said you were his partner. He had your ID copy." "I didn't give him that," I said. He shrugged, not cruelly, just resigned. "Families do weird things." He showed me the signature pages. My signature, slanted the way I write when I'm rushing. Except the loops were too perfect. Grandpa's hand, wearing my name. I left and sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my palms hurt. I'd been trying to manage this like a series of tasks, but now it was in my bloodstream. My identity, my finances, my future. At home, my wife said, quietly, "This is going to touch us, isn't it?" I nodded. I couldn't bring myself to say out loud how far it might reach. That night, I dreamed of Grandpa's hands counting invisible bills. When I finally opened the rest of the thumb drive, I found a folder labeled Family. Inside were scanned documents that made my chest tighten. Forged promissory notes with my mom's signature, my aunt's signature, even my cousin's. A spreadsheet that tracked contributions like we were all investors in Grandpa's private operation. Then I found something worse. A scanned life insurance policy on Grandpa, with my aunt listed as the owner and beneficiary. The premiums were being paid from the LLC account. I called my aunt and asked, point blank, "Did you know about this?" She was quiet for a beat too long. Then she said, "I knew he had arrangements." "Arrangements," I repeated. My voice stayed flat, but my throat tightened. "You knew he was using my name?" "I didn't know that part," she said quickly. "He said he needed someone reliable. He said you'd understand." That phrase, "he said you'd understand," made something hot and sharp flare in me. Grandpa didn't just steal. He curated his victims. He chose who would be ashamed enough to stay quiet. My aunt admitted, in pieces, that Grandpa had been giving her money for years. "Dad helped with my mortgage," she said. "He paid for Jenna's rehab. He said it was from savings." The strange events, the envelopes, the visitors weren't random. They were payments, bribes, hush money, and my aunt had been taking them. When I hung up, my hands were shaking hard enough that I had to sit on the floor of my closet, like a teenager hiding from a storm. I thought the solution was to sell the house, pay off the obvious debts, and then let the rest be a legal problem for whoever wanted to chase a dead man. That was my false resolution. I even felt a thin kind of relief, like a belt loosening after months too tight. We listed the house. It sold quickly because it was a nice old place in a good district. On closing day, my mom wore lipstick like it was a funeral. My aunt smiled too much. Then the title company flagged additional liens. Not one, several. Some from creditors we'd never heard of. Some from people, real people, claiming Grandpa owed them money personally. A woman named Linda showed up at my mom's house with a folder and red eyes. She said Grandpa had taken $80,000 from her husband's retirement when he got laid off, promising it would earn better than any bank. Now her husband was sick, and she couldn't pay for treatments without that money. My mom offered her coffee like hospitality could cover what we'd done. I stood there feeling my face burn with a shame that wasn't entirely mine, but still clung to me. Linda looked at me and said, "He told us you'd make it right if anything happened to him." My stomach dropped. Grandpa had been building a story about me, too. The responsible grandson, the cleanup crew. After Linda left, my mom whispered, "What did your grandfather do?" I didn't answer because the truth was bigger than a sentence. It was an ecosystem. Lies feeding money, feeding more lies. And now it was in our living room. I finally met with a federal investigator after the accountant, quietly protecting himself, filed something. The investigator wasn't dramatic. He was tired and thorough. He asked for the thumb drive. I handed over a copy, not the original because I still wasn't clean enough to be brave. He asked me if I'd used any of the cash I found. I lied. The lie tasted metallic, like pennies, and it sat behind my teeth all day. Denial had shifted into something uglier. I wasn't just covering for Grandpa. I was covering for myself. The investigator explained the likely shape of the case. Fraud, identity theft, tax evasion. Victims could sue the estate. The government could pursue unpaid taxes. The debts in my name would have to be contested, which meant affidavits, handwriting analysis, time, and exposure. When I got home, my wife was sitting at the table with our budget spreadsheet open. She'd highlighted daycare, mortgage, insurance. "We can't float this," she said. Not crying, just stating reality. That's when anger finally arrived, late but full-bodied. I was angry at Grandpa for choosing me, angry at my aunt for taking money and playing innocent, angry at my mom for signing things without asking questions, angry at myself for thinking I could manage a crime like it was a household project. I punched nothing. I raised my voice at no one. I just sat there with clenched hands, feeling the anger heat my skin, and realized restraint doesn't stop pain. It just keeps it quiet. That night, I went to the closet and looked at the spot where the cash had been. Empty. My stomach twisted with guilt and a strange, sick relief. The lawsuits started in small ways, then stacked. Certified letters. Process servers. A neighbor who used to wave now crossed the street. My aunt stopped answering calls. My uncle asked if he could borrow money because we're all in this. My mom's health dipped. She developed a tremor in her left hand that made her spill tea. One afternoon, I found a letter in Grandpa's handwriting tucked into the back of the ledger. I must have missed it before, or maybe I wasn't ready to see it. It wasn't an apology. It was instructions. He wrote that the system was necessary because banks don't help people, and the government steals anyway. He wrote that he kept the family afloat when no one else would. He wrote that he chose me because I was steady and not sentimental. He wrote, "You will be tempted to act righteous. Don't. Protect the blood." I read that line 3 times. Protect the blood. As if family was a currency you spend to justify anything. I felt guilt and relief tangled together. Relief because part of me wanted permission to be ruthless. Guilt because I'd already taken it. I called the investigator back and told him the truth about the cash payment. My voice shook, but I got the words out. He didn't praise me. He just noted it like this was a category of human behavior he'd seen before. After I hung up, my wife sat next to me and put her hand on my knee. I realized then that the marriage wasn't being tested by one big dramatic betrayal. It was being eroded by 1,000 small compromises, each one dressed up as practicality. We would not be heroes in this story. We'd just be people trying not to drown. The house sale eventually went through, but there was almost nothing left after liens, legal fees, and negotiated settlements. My mom moved into a small rental and stopped hosting holidays. My aunt filed for bankruptcy and blamed everyone else. My credit took years to untangle. Some accounts were removed, some stuck like burrs. We delayed having another kid. We stopped talking about retirement as if it was a given. Grandpa's name became a kind of poison. People who used to call him Sweet Walter now spit it out like something bitter. A few still defended him, saying he helped folks. They didn't say it when victims were in the room. I wish I could say I found closure. I didn't. What I found was a quieter kind of acceptance. The understanding that a person can love you and still use you. That generosity can be a leash. That my calm, rational persona wasn't virtue. It was a tool Grandpa recognized and exploited, and sometimes it made me complicit. A month ago, while sorting the last of my mom's boxes, I found one of Grandpa's old envelopes wedged under a stack of photos. It was empty, but it still held the faint smell of his aftershave and paper. My hands went cold instantly. I stood there in the dim hallway light, holding that envelope like it might contain another secret if I shook it hard enough. For a second I could hear his voice, steady and certain. "Don't waste it." I threw it away, but later, washing dishes, I caught myself rubbing my thumb against my forefinger the way he used to, counting invisible bills. Like my body remembered something my mind wanted to forget.